We're watching the talks today in Egypt between Israel and Hamas indirectly. The two sides don't speak themselves, but indirectly through mediators. Their representatives will be negotiating and will be focusing on the first phase in U.S. President Trump's peace plan. In a social media post, the president urges negotiators to move fast, adding that he expects an agreement by the end of the week. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio acknowledges there are still difficult issues to work out.
No one here is claiming this is done. What we are claiming is that we have moved so we are at a much better place today than we were 7 days ago. A lot could happen wrong here, but so much could happen right if we can get this done, and we're very dedicated to making that happen.
Rubio is also urging Israel to stop the bombardment in Gaza, saying that hostages can't be released when airstrikes are taking place and the Red Cross humanitarian teams cannot do their work safely. So all of that we are watching, and really what we heard from the U.S. Secretary of State is a fantastic basis for a conversation now with Michael Lynk, who's a professor emeritus of law at Western University, and for 6 years he was the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory. He's in Ottawa this morning. Professor, welcome back to our program.
Thank you very much for having me, Heather.
Let's come back to the most recent social media post we've had from the U.S. president, Professor, in which he says the technical teams are clarifying the final details. The first phase of all of this should be completed this week. And again, this is all getting underway in Egypt today, the indirect talks. What is your degree of optimism as we begin this week?
I think I'm optimistic that there will be an exchange of the remaining Israeli hostages that are being kept in Gaza for a large number of Palestinian prisoners. Beyond that, I think it becomes much harder to have much optimism that this plan is going to succeed. We've learned from bitter history over the last 35 or 40 years of peacemaking in the Middle East that for a peace plan to have a chance of succeeding, it has to have explicit timelines for events to occur. And beyond the release of the Israeli hostages and the Palestinian detainees, there are no timelines with respect to this. As well, there has to be a credible and swift pathway to a Palestinian state. That's absolutely absent in this peace plan. And this has to be as well, we've learned from bitter experience, grounded in international law and UN resolutions. And that's also entirely absent. So short-term, optimistic that these immediate steps will probably succeed. In the medium term and longer term, I think we have a lot to be concerned about.
It's interesting, as you point out, some of the potential pitfalls as you see them, the timelines. Is that really in terms of the timeline for Israel's withdrawal from Gaza or for disarmament, or are there key aspects that you would like to see more specific timelines attached?
All of this, of what you've mentioned, let's keep in mind that international law and recent UN resolutions have said that the Israeli occupation, not just of Gaza, but also of East Jerusalem and the West Bank, is illegal and has to end as rapidly as possible. In fact, the deadline that was set by the UN for the Israeli occupation to entirely end was expired last month, and that didn't happen. The other aspect of this, which is always worrying, is that in order for any of these plans to have a chance for success, there has to be a full-throated commitment by the United States to enforce these agreements. And that hasn't happened in the past, and certainly hasn't happened with the most recent ceasefire that was negotiated in January and then breached by Israel in March with no consequences for Israel. So I'm not confident that we're going to see the kind of peace and stability that I think the world is yearning for anytime soon.
Coming back to that Donald Trump social post again, as we look at the conclusion of that, he lays out all of the things that he hopes occur and then says, or massive bloodshed will follow, something that nobody wants to see. Sounds like an ultimatum there. What do you interpret that as meaning?
Well, what I think the Americans, along with the Israelis, want to see is a complete disarmament and a complete disbandment of Hamas. That the plan, as it currently stands, is offering amnesty to Hamas fighters and also a safe passage out for those Hamas militants who may want to leave Gaza. That itself would mean, I suppose, an end to the presence of Hamas, but it doesn't then invite the Palestinian Authority, which is recognized by most states in the world as the voice and the representative of the Palestinian people to then come into Gaza to begin a new phase of governance for the Strip on a pathway to peace and a Palestinian state. None of that is really laid out in this plan, and I doubt if those are issues that are being negotiated this week in Cairo.
Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, has taken a large measure of credit for the plan. He did so in a televised address over the weekend. Is he right in doing so? Who is really calling the shots here?
Well, it's interesting because there also was a television interview with President Trump where he said that he had strong-armed Prime Minister Netanyahu into agreeing to these terms. And as we've heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu, there are parts of the Trump peace plan that he himself, Netanyahu, does not agree with. He doesn't agree with the full withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip, and he doesn't agree with the very vague statement of a pathway for Palestinian self-determination and a Palestinian state. He said he opposes both of those aspects, and I think he's probably right in saying those won't occur without his consent.
I want to ask you about something that's just broken in the last half hour or so. It is Nobel Week, Professor, and on Friday of this week, we will learn who the Nobel Peace Prize winner is. We've heard Donald Trump very publicly state he thinks he's deserving of winning. But adding to that campaign is the group of hostage families who've just released an open letter which they've written to the Nobel Peace Committee. And they talk about why they think Donald Trump should win it this year, his determination to bring peace. They talk about, at this very moment, President Trump's comprehensive plan to release all remaining hostages and finally end this terrible war is on the table. And so they say that they strongly urge the committee to award President Trump the Nobel Peace Prize because he has vowed he will not rest and will not stop until every last hostage is back home. Public endorsement of him as this year's Peace Prize recipient. What do you think is the likelihood of that?
Very, very, very low. I mean, I think the Nobel Peace Prize Committee has long since made up its mind and made its decision about who's going to win the 2025 Peace Prize. And I'd be surprised if it was Donald Trump. But let's also keep caution with respect to this. There's a history of awarding Nobel Peace Prizes prematurely for the prospects of a durable peace in the Middle East. There, 1979, Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin of Egypt and Israel were awarded a peace prize that brought peace between Israel and Egypt, but not a larger lasting peace. And as well, in 1994, Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres, and Yasser Arafat won a Nobel Peace Prize as well. And that hasn't brought, that was over 30 years ago, and that has not brought peace to Israel and Palestine since. So the Nobel Peace Prize, it looks like a false trap for thinking that we've resolved this enduring conflict.
Professor, thank you as always for your time and expertise this morning.
Thank you very much again, Heather, for having me on the show.
Michael Lynk is a professor emeritus of law at Western and the former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory.